Hey, what's going on? In this video series and being a terminal operator and doing a task at my job at the terminal, I'm going to be talking about doing a rack change. So what is a rack change? Well, a rack change is at the terminal that I work at, we store product. So for example, say like you have a tank that is just storing product and is considered a inactive tank. The tank is not to the truck rack. So when a 18-wheeler or tanker come and load product, they're not pulling from that tank, they're pulling from an active tank, a tank that's live to the truck rack. So you have active tanks and you have inactive tanks. So what is a rack change? So for example, let's say you had two tanks beside each other and they were both able to go to the rack. So for example, if you had tank A to the rack for NX1 and however long that tank lasts depends on the amount of traffic, the volume, the amount of product that drivers are pulling. And it's so many variables because I believe drivers can go to any terminal, but we don't have any dealings with that. We don't have anything to do with that. A driver just shows up and load product. So if the tank product level is getting low, we'll say, hey, we need to do a rack change. And then we'll get confirmation to do the rack change. So it'll be as simple as stopping everything. And if you watch my last video, I talked about tank gauging. We'll stop everything, stop loading, get a good tank gauge on the closing tank, and then we'll get a good gauge on the opening tank. And then once we get the gauges, we'll line everything up. So it'll be as simple as closing X amount of valves and opening X amount of valves. So it just all depends on what rack, what annex, what product it is. So I'm not going to get into specific details because of course every terminal is different. And it's just a matter of knowing the rack change, just knowing what valves to close, what valves to open. And I actually enjoy what I do. I get a lot of joy out of it because when I'm sitting there turning the valves, I sit there and I isolate. See my arms? So I get a good burn. So to each their own. You know, a lot of times when stuff happens, I try to make the best of it. So we gotta do a rack change. Hey, I get to get a little upper body workout. I get to turn valves, open, close, do whatever. And then I say, hey, I got the valves set up correctly for this tank. And then whoever's in operations will bring the rack back up. So when a driver pulls, that product is not gonna pull from the tank that's set up to go to the truck rack. And I know also that can kind of fall under a tank transfer because I would imagine some terminals would have a truck rack and you can have one live tank. So for example, say like you had 4 or 5 or 6 or X amount of storage tanks, inactive tanks. And when this active tank gets low in product, instead of saying, hey, we need to do a rack change, we might say, hey, we need to do a transfer. So we're transferring from whatever tank to this active tank. So that's an example of where a tank transfer could actually fall under a rack change. But I know in my first video, I talked about my schedule, the pay, what it is I do, why I enjoy it. And in my second video, I talked about tank gauging. Tank gauging is a big part of what I do, gauging tanks, whether it's a active tank or whether it's a inactive tank. But if it's an active tank, when I gauge it, the rack has to be down. Because if I climb the tank to get a gauge on an active tank and then drivers are loading from that tank, of course my gauge is not going to be accurate. So that's why if I'm gauging an accurate tank, then the rack has to be down, meaning no one is able to pull from that tank so I can get a good gauge on that tank. And like I say, for me, 15 minutes. So 15 minutes to go to the tank, to climb the tank, to get everything grounded, to get my 3 temps, to get my good gauge, leisurely, not rushing, taking my time. So for me, if I'm gauging 4 tanks, I know that's gonna take about an hour. And that's one thing that I love about my job is there is no really rush, because as an operator, you know what it is that you're supposed to be doing, and you know what's acceptable and what. So I take a lot of pride and I get a lot of accomplishment in what I do, getting good gauges. So if I come back and bring a gauge in operations, I know that gauge is good, because I know when I gauge accurate. I just don't rush up the tank and get a jacked up gauge and then rush down like, you got to go back out there and gauge. I take my time, make sure I do it right the first time. And I actually enjoy doing rack changes because it gives me a sense of accomplishment. I know I'm able to go out there into the tank farm, look at the piping. One thing that my operations manager stated that I always remember, it's good to know what valves to open, but you need to make sure you know what valves should be closed. So if I go out there and I say, hey, I need to open these 3 valves, well, normally there's a valve wherever that normally is closed and it could have been left open from a previous movement. So by me opening those 3 valves and not checking other valves that should be closed, when we start the transfer or when I put that tank to the rack, you can commingle products, an inadvertent transfer. So that's bad. So because if you have a grade of product here and then you have a grade of product here, and then you go out and open 2 valves and now you got product commingling, that's bad. That's very bad. I mean, you wouldn't mix your milk and your lemonade in the refrigerator separated. And that's one thing about knowing the terminal. So if it's down and you don't have nothing going on the weekends, on nights, that's something that as an operator you can be doing. A part of ABOs, going out and about, listening, you looking, you sniffing, but also you walking out the pipelines. So for the most part, if I had a big dry erase board and I had to walk out the piping, I think I can pretty much draw all the piping and write all the valves and everything for the whole terminal, because I done walked it so many times. And that's, I guess, a part of being a good terminal operator. Well, like I said, this video was talking about rack changes or a tank transfer and what active and inactive tank is. So if you're thinking about being a terminal operator, please watch my other videos that I have. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please check out some of my videos, because I love the outdoors and fishing. And click the like buttons and become a subscriber. Thank you.